Let's begin by peeling back the curtain on something that quietly governs how we act, react, and decide, often without even knowing its name. Game theory at its core is the science of strategy. It's not about games with dice and boards. It's about decisions, tensions, moves made when the outcome depends not just on you, but on someone else, watching, waiting, deciding too. It's the study of what happens when your best move depends on the move of another, and theirs on yours. Imagine walking into a negotiation. Two people, one table. Neither holds all the power, but both want to walk away having won something. What do you offer first? How much do you concede? What do you hide? What do you reveal? This quiet dance, where each step is a calculation, is exactly the kind of situation game theory helps us decode. Or picture this: a four-way stop. No signs, no lights, no clear rules. Just four drivers staring across empty intersections, each wondering, do I go now? Will they yield? Do they trust me to stop? No words, no signals, just instinct, caution, and a game unfolding in real time. That brief hesitation, that split-second judgment, is strategy at work, and game theory gives us the map to understand it. At its simplest, game theory breaks down every interaction into a few key elements: players, the decision-makers; strategies, the choices available to each; payoffs, the consequences of every possible combination of moves. It doesn't tell us what's ethical or what's kind. It doesn't weigh what's just. It simply charts what happens when thinking minds collide. Like a chessboard, except every piece is conscious, calculating, planning, sometimes even bluffing. Some games happen once, others repeat endlessly. Some reward cooperation, others reward betrayal. But in all of them, patterns emerge: trust, fear, anticipation, retaliation. These aren't emotions alone. They're strategic tools. Game theory isn't about games. It's about seeing that life, in its quietest corners and loudest showdowns, is built on invisible games we're always playing. From boardrooms to war rooms, from romantic hesitations to billion-dollar pricing battles, game theory is the language we use to understand the strategy behind choice and the echo it makes in someone else's mind. Most decisions we make don't happen in isolation. We act. Someone responds. Suddenly, a quiet interaction becomes a complex web, a system of moves and counter-moves woven by unseen threads. That's precisely why game theory matters. It gives us a framework, a structured way to make sense of situations where your fate isn't shaped by your hand alone, but by how your choices ripple into others, and how theirs come rushing back. Game theory is more than logic. It's the logic behind strategy, behind hesitation, behind the moment someone pauses at a fork in the road, not because they're uncertain, but because they're calculating. It helps us see why people join forces one day and compete the next. Why trust builds between strangers or collapses in a single moment. Why even the smartest decisions can spiral into failure when others are thinking just as hard. And that's where game theory becomes so powerful. It doesn't just ask, what should someone do? It asks, What will they likely do, especially when they know others are asking the same question? You don't need to study this in a textbook to live it. You experience it every day. Think about something as ordinary as standing in a queue. Someone cuts ahead. In a blink, you're not just annoyed. You're weighing your move. Do you confront them? Is it worth the tension? What will others think? Will they support you or look away? All of that flashes through your mind. A silent, strategic calculation. Now, widen that lens. Think of businesses setting prices. One drops theirs to win customers. Another follows. Soon, they're all locked in a race to the bottom. Everyone wants to win, but together, they all lose. What's best for one can backfire when mirrored by many. Game theory helps illuminate these puzzles. It models the invisible tension between self-interest and shared outcomes. It shows when it's smarter to cooperate, even with a competitor, and when standing alone is the only winning move. This logic applies far beyond business. Consider global politics. Two nations stockpile weapons, each afraid to disarm, worried the other won't. Even though peace is better for both, neither side blinks. It's not about desire. It's about trust and fear and prediction. Game theory maps these standoffs. It reveals the fears and pressures beneath the surface, the unspoken logic that drives us to escalation when retreat might have been wiser. But strategy isn't always about tension. Game theory also explains how cooperation works, how deals are struck, how votes are cast, how alliances form, even how parents and children navigate bedtime negotiations. It's not about control or manipulation. It's about awareness, a clearer view of the stage we share. Because in almost every part of life, our decisions are not just ours. They're shaped by anticipation, by guessing how others might act and how we must adapt in return. Game theory teaches us to think not one step ahead, but three. To trace the paths between cause and consequence. To recognize that even the quietest decisions echo louder when others are listening, thinking, and reacting too. It's not about being clever. It's about being conscious. Conscious of the patterns we live inside, the silent chessboards we move across, and the truth that every move shapes more than just the next moment. It shapes how others move next. That's why game theory matters, not just as an idea, but as a tool to bring clarity where confusion often reigns. Where did it all begin? This quiet science of strategy? It didn't start with video games or game nights or even the playful battles of chess. It began with something older, deeper, more deliberate. A question wrapped in logic. How do people make decisions when others are also trying to win? Game theory took shape in the early 20th century, but its roots stretch further, reaching into the dusty corners of military planning, ancient diplomacy, even the psychological duels of royal courts. Long before it had a name, humans were playing the game. Generals mapped battlefields. Rulers weighed alliances. Chess masters saw 5 moves ahead. But these were instincts, not formulas. Wisdom passed through experience, not captured in equations. That changed in 1944. A mathematician named John von Neumann and an economist named Oscar Morgenstern published a book that would quietly reshape how we think about thinking. It was called The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. Their goal? Not to guess what people might do, but to build a system, a logical framework that could predict it. They weren't playing games. They were building a science. At the heart of their work was the concept of a zero-sum game, a scenario where one person's gain is exactly balanced by another's loss. Think of poker, or chess, or war. Every victory has a cost. Every move creates a ripple. Von Neumann had already proven something remarkable: that every two-player zero-sum game has at least one stable solution, a balance point, where neither player can be outmaneuvered if they choose their strategy wisely. It was elegant and radical, and it became the cornerstone of something much bigger. But game theory didn't stop there. In the 1950s, another mind arrived: John Nash, a young mathematician with a quiet intensity and a revolutionary idea. Nash introduced what we now call the Nash equilibrium, a state in a game where no player can benefit by changing their strategy as long as the others hold theirs. It was no longer about just winning or losing. It was about balance, how even competing minds could settle into stable patterns, not because it's ideal, but because it's predictable. This subtle shift turned game theory into something far more human. Not every decision is a duel. Sometimes it's a compromise, a quiet standoff, a mutual pause. As the theory evolved, its influence spread. Economists used it to map price wars, market behaviors, and competition in the corporate world. Political scientists applied it to voting systems, treaties, and brinkmanship on the world stage. Biologists saw it reflected in animal behavior, how species compete, cooperate, and survive. What began as abstract math became a universal lens, revealing the patterns in conflict, the rhythms of alliance, the silent logic behind choice. But the true power of game theory wasn't just in its equations. It was in its perspective. It showed that strategy could be studied, measured, and even anticipated, that decisions, even messy ones, could follow structures, that behavior, even emotional, could form patterns. It offered more than prediction. It offered clarity, in a world where we often act without seeing the full board. In the end, game theory wasn't just a theory about games. It became a way to understand decision-making itself, a language for the delicate dance between your goals and your guesses about everyone else's. Game theory didn't rise from a single flash of insight. It was built, brick by brick, on strategic revolutions, each one reshaping how we understand choice, conflict, and cooperation. Its foundations were laid by pioneers, but the most profound breakthroughs came from concepts that cracked open entire fields of human behavior. One of the first great shifts was the Nash equilibrium. Before Nash, game theory was focused on zero-sum games, winners and losers, gain and loss perfectly balanced. But Nash introduced something more nuanced: the idea that in many situations, people don't seek to win outright. They seek stability. A Nash equilibrium is that quiet point where no player can improve their outcome by changing strategy alone, so long as others hold their course. It's not perfect. It's not optimal. But it's sustainable. A pattern that holds because no one dares to blink first. This wasn't just a mathematical idea. It captured something deeply human. How we often settle, not because we've won, but because change feels too risky. Social dynamics, price wars, silent compromises. The Nash equilibrium offered a way to model them all. Then came another powerful insight, this time from Thomas Schelling. His work explored the subtle, almost invisible world of strategic signaling. Not action, but suggestion. Not power, but perception. Schelling showed how players, especially nations, can influence one another without speaking directly. A military drill, a pause in talks. Even silence can send a message louder than words. These signals don't change the game board. They change how others read it. In diplomacy, in negotiations, in everyday interactions, Schelling revealed that strategy is as much about psychology as it is about logic. Another breakthrough came with the study of repeated games, particularly through the work of Robert Axelrod. He asked a timeless question: can cooperation emerge in a world ruled by self-interest? His answer came through simple simulations. One stood out: tit for tat, a strategy that starts with trust but punishes betrayal and forgives just as easily. Over time, it proved remarkably effective, not because it manipulated, but because it modeled reciprocity. Axelrod showed that cooperation doesn't always need to be enforced. It can arise naturally when players expect to meet again. Trust, it turns out, is a form of strategy too. But game theory's breakthroughs didn't stay in the realm of economics and politics. They leapt into biology, explaining how animals fight for mates, share food, or form hierarchies. They entered psychology, where real humans rarely behave like perfect calculators. We care about fairness. We act on emotion. We trust. We hold grudges. And yet, those too can be modeled, revealed, understood. These advances didn't just solve abstract puzzles. They transformed game theory into something vivid, practical, alive. They helped us see that strategy isn't manipulation. It's a mirror, one that reflects how humans navigate the deep uncertainty of shared decision-making. Whether in boardrooms, ecosystems, or quiet moments between two people, the biggest breakthroughs in game theory gave us more than tools. They gave us a new way of seeing, how we align incentives, anticipate responses, and shape outcomes in a world full of other minds playing their own games too. In the language of game theory, a game isn't a toy or a pastime, it's a structure. A silent framework beneath every choice made when more than one mind is involved. And like all structures, no matter how vast or complex, every game begins with just a few essential parts. Once you see them, you begin to see the design, not just in politics or business, but in everyday life. A dinner bill, a whispered negotiation, a glance exchanged before someone speaks. The first element is the player. A player is any entity, person, company, government, that makes a decision within the game. If two friends are debating who should take the last slice of pizza, that's a game with two players. If rival companies adjust their pricing based on each other's moves, they too are locked in a game. Identifying the players is step one, because without decision makers, there are no decisions to model. Then come the strategies. A strategy isn't just a move, it's a plan, a complete set of choices a player can make in every possible scenario. In something as simple as rock, paper, scissors, your strategy might be to randomize your moves or always open with rock. In complex games, like negotiations, strategies range from soft compromises to hard ultimatums, to wait, to bluff, to walk away. The strategy is the player's blueprint, a guide for action no matter what the other side does. Next, we reach the payoffs. Every game has consequences. A payoff is what each player receives based on the combined choices made. It could be a number, a win, a loss, a profit, a smile, or the avoidance of conflict. In a friendly bet, the payoff might be $5. In corporate warfare, it might be market dominance or survival. The key is this: payoffs reflect value, what matters to each player. Some outcomes are good, some are neutral, some are costly, but all are calculated. Then there are rules. Unlike board games, these aren't always printed on the box. In game theory, rules define the boundaries. What can players do? What can't they? Can they communicate? Are moves made at the same time, or one after another? Some games are simultaneous. Each player acts blindly, without knowing the other's move, like two people secretly choosing whether to trust or betray. Other games are sequential. One player moves, then the next reacts. Every step builds on the last. And finally, there's information. What does each player know when making their decision? Some games offer perfect clarity, like chess, where every piece is visible and every move transparent. Others are played in shadows. Poker, military standoffs, business negotiations. Here, players guess, bluff, and read intentions. In these games of imperfect information, success depends not only on logic, but on perception and prediction. Put all of these together: players, strategies, payoffs, rules, and information, and you have the bones of a game. It doesn't matter if it's a market negotiation, a political debate, or two children deciding who gets the last word. If multiple minds make decisions based on each other's choices, you're in a game. Game theory doesn't dress it up. It strips it down, revealing the simple framework beneath even the most complex interaction. And from that skeleton, we begin to see how strategy breathes, how decisions take shape, and how outcomes, however unpredictable, often follow a deeper, silent design. Not every victory requires someone else to lose, but sometimes it does. That's the quiet line that separates two very different worlds in game theory. The first is the world of zero-sum games. In a zero-sum game, the total outcome is fixed, like a sealed container. No matter what happens inside, whatever one person gains, someone else must lose in equal measure. The sum of wins and losses always balances out to zero. If you walk away with more, it's because someone else walks away with less. Think of a poker table. If one player wins $50, that money didn't appear from nowhere. It came from the hands of others. Or picture a football match. One team scores the final goal. The other walks off defeated. There is no draw, no shared triumph, just one clear win and one quiet loss. In zero-sum games, success is subtraction. What you gain must be taken. What they lose must be claimed. These games breed competition, rivalry, secrecy. They push players to guard their moves, mask their intentions, strike hard, and win fast. Because in these scenarios, helping someone else means hurting yourself. But not all games follow that path. Some belong to a different world, the world of non-zero-sum games. In these, the total outcome isn't fixed. The pie can grow or shrink. It can be shared, split unevenly, or multiplied. Here, your gain doesn't have to be someone else's loss, and sometimes everyone can win, or everyone can fall together. Imagine two companies debating whether to fight or cooperate. If they compete fiercely, they may both drive down prices and erode profits. But if they collaborate, by sharing technology or entering different markets, they might both come out ahead. Or picture two roommates dividing chores. If both pitch in, the apartment stays clean with minimal effort. If one stops, resentment builds. If both slack off, they both suffer. In non-zero-sum games, cooperation isn't charity, it's strategy. Helping others can help you. Trust builds returns. Generosity becomes a calculated move. Understanding the difference between zero-sum and non-zero-sum games shifts the way we think. About relationships, business, politics, even everyday choices. In zero-sum situations, people tend to compete. They hide information, make sharp moves, act quickly and decisively, because someone else's rise means their fall. But in non-zero-sum situations, openness can win the day. Transparency, collaboration, even kindness can lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. It also explains why, in real life, people sometimes surprise us, choosing trust, offering help, or making generous moves not out of selflessness, but out of enlightened self-interest. Because in a non-zero-sum world, your win can ride alongside someone else's. Still, zero-sum thinking lingers, especially in high-stakes situations where fear clouds judgment and loss feels personal. It's easy to fall into a mindset where every gain is theft and every alliance a risk. That's why game theory matters here. It teaches us to recognize the game we're in, to ask, is this win really zero-sum? Is competition the only way? Or is there room for strategy that lifts more than just one player? Because sometimes the smartest move isn't about taking more, it's about creating more to share. In a world of shifting choices, where everyone is watching and being watched, decisions rarely exist in isolation. You don't just act, you react, you anticipate. You imagine what others will do and then shape your own move around that imagined world. That's why the Nash equilibrium is such a monumental idea. It captures the very essence of strategic thinking and crystallizes it into something we can study, predict, and even use. Before John Nash, game theory lived mostly in the land of clear-cut winners and losers. It was a battlefield, a poker game, a duel. But Nash asked a different question, one both simple and revolutionary. What if every player in a game picks the best possible strategy they can based on what they think everyone else will do, and no one wants to change their mind afterward? That point, where everyone is doing the best they can, given everyone else's move, is the Nash equilibrium. It's not where someone wins outright. It's not even where the outcome is ideal. It's where things settle. Because no one has anything to gain by changing their strategy alone. Let's break it down with a familiar example. Picture two coffee shops on the same street. Each must choose. Charge a high price or a low price. If they both charge high, they split the market fairly. If one charges low, they attract more customers. If both charge low, they undercut each other, and profits suffer. Each shop is calculating not just profit, but what the other might do. And the Nash equilibrium is the price point where neither has a reason to change course, given the other's choice. What makes this so powerful is that it works without trust, without cooperation, and even without communication. Each player is self-interested, but through that self-interest, a stable pattern emerges. The Nash equilibrium isn't about the best outcome for the group. It's not a guarantee of fairness or efficiency. It's a snapshot of reality, a balance point born from mutual strategy, not mutual goodwill. And that's the beauty of it. Before Nash, most models in game theory only applied to strict win-lose games. But his idea widened the lens, allowing us to study real-world dynamics where competition and cooperation coexist, where motives are murky, and players might shift roles with time. Thanks to Nash, economists could better understand market behaviors. Political scientists could model negotiations, alliances, and conflicts. Biologists could explain how animals evolve stable strategies for mating, hunting, or defending territory. And more than that, the Nash equilibrium brought predictability to a field full of chaos. When many outcomes are possible, it helps narrow the list to those most likely to happen. It shows where systems settle, where change slows, where incentives freeze. It explains why people don't always chase the highest possible reward, because doing so would disturb a delicate balance. It shows why patterns repeat, why rival companies price match even if they could earn more by taking a risk, why nations maintain uneasy truces instead of seeking dominance. Because when everyone is trying to outthink everyone else, the result isn't always action. It's equilibrium. Not perfect, not ideal, but stable. And in strategy, stability is power. That's why Nash's insight wasn't just a clever theory. It became the beating heart of modern game theory. A mirror for how we choose, not in a vacuum, but in a world filled with other minds doing the same. Sometimes, the path to the best outcome requires a leap of faith, a quiet moment of trust between people who could just as easily choose to protect themselves. But trust is fragile, because often the biggest personal reward comes from breaking it. That tension between mutual gain and individual advantage sits at the very heart of some of life's most difficult decisions. It appears more often than we realize, and game theory gives us a way to name it, frame it, and understand its pull. At the core, this is a choice between two instincts: shield yourself or take a chance on someone else. When everyone faces the same decision, doubt spreads like wildfire. Even when cooperation could lead to the best outcome for all, No one wants to be the fool, the one left exposed, taken advantage of, or left behind. So we hedge, we hold back, and slowly the chance for shared success begins to unravel. You see it in business. Two companies might profit by keeping prices stable. But if one undercuts the other to grab a bigger slice, the other retaliates. Prices plummet, margins disappear, and both lose more than they gained. You see it in international politics. Two nations agree to reduce emissions, but one secretly cheats, boosting its economy while the other stays true. The trust crumbles, the agreement collapses, and the climate suffers for everyone. This isn't just theory. It's a pattern, a dilemma, a mirror we see ourselves in, again and again. And it has a name: the prisoner's dilemma. It's a situation where two individuals would both be better off if they trusted each other, but the temptation to betray pulls them apart. Because the risk of being the only one who cooperates can feel worse than mutual failure. But this clash between trust and self-interest doesn't happen in a vacuum. What matters is the structure around the decision. Will these players meet again? Is this a one-time deal or a long-term relationship? Are there consequences for betrayal, or is everything riding on good faith alone? These questions matter. They shape behavior before any move is made. In one-time interactions, players lean toward caution. They act defensively. They protect themselves because there's no second chance. But in repeated games, where relationships stretch across time, cooperation can slowly emerge. Trust becomes a strategy. Reputation matters. Patterns form. Game theory shows us how these subtle shifts in environment and structure change everything. It reveals why even intelligent, well-meaning people sometimes make choices that leave everyone worse off, and how that cycle can repeat indefinitely, unless the rules of the game are changed. Because ultimately, clashing or cooperating isn't just about intention. It's about conditions. It's about timing. It's about whether the game itself invites unity or breeds suspicion. When the setup favors fear, even the kindest players build walls. But when the stage is set for trust, a different story unfolds, where strategy and humanity finally begin to align. It's one of the simplest setups in all of game theory, and yet its shadow stretches across politics, business, and the quiet choices of everyday life. The prisoner's dilemma matters because it reveals a frustrating truth. Sometimes, doing what's best for yourself leads to a worse outcome for everyone. It begins with a scene. Two people, arrested for a crime, separated, no way to communicate, each offered the same deal. If one confesses while the other stays silent, the confessor walks free, and the silent one takes the full punishment. If both confess, they share a moderate sentence. If both stay silent, they each receive only a light penalty. It's a test, not of morality, but of strategy. Each person thinks, if the other stays quiet, I can go free by confessing. But then, if the other confesses, I should confess too, just to avoid the worst punishment. That reasoning, cold, logical, self-protective, leads both to confess, even though staying silent would have given them both a better outcome. That's the dilemma. rational minds making rational moves that lead to irrational results. And the brilliance of this setup is how often it appears outside the prison walls. Two companies locked in competition. If both hold back on aggressive marketing, they save money, keep margins healthy. But if one strikes first, they risk falling behind. So both go all in. Costs rise, profits fall, and neither gains an edge. Or two nations negotiating climate policy. If both cut emissions, everyone breathes cleaner air. But each secretly wonders, what if they reduce and I keep growing? The fear of losing ground makes both resist. The result? A warming planet and lost trust on a global scale. The prisoner's dilemma shows us how fragile cooperation can be. Not because people are evil or selfish, but because the structure itself rewards protection over collaboration. It's not about malice. It's about fear. The fear of being the only one who chose trust and got burned for it. That's why it's studied so widely, because its logic appears everywhere. In personal relationships where honesty is risky, in business rivalries where holding back can mean losing, in political deals where mutual benefit is clear, but mistrust wins anyway. The simplicity of the dilemma is deceptive. Underneath it lies a powerful model for understanding breakdowns, betrayals, and the paradox of rational minds creating suboptimal worlds. It doesn't just explain behavior, it warns us. If the rules don't reward trust, trust will fail, even when everyone sees a better path ahead. That's what makes the prisoner's dilemma more than a clever thought experiment. It's a mirror, one that reflects how easily hope can collapse when fear is built into the game. Not every decision is about winning or losing. Sometimes it's about trust. Sometimes it's about how much risk you're willing to carry on the belief that someone else will carry theirs too. That's what makes the stag hunt and the chicken game two of the most intriguing models in game theory. Because beneath their simplicity lie deeper questions about ambition, about fear, about pride, and about the fragile lines that connect us. Let's begin with the stag hunt. Two hunters enter the forest. They can either hunt a stag together or each go their own way to chase a rabbit. The stag offers a greater reward, but only if both commit. If one hunts stag and the other hunts rabbit, the stag hunter walks away with nothing. So the choice becomes this: do I trust the other person to stay with me? Or do I play it safe and settle for less? It's a test of mutual confidence. Because the risk isn't just failure. It's being the only one who took a risk while the other backed out. And that dynamic shows up everywhere. Two companies consider merging to challenge a larger rival. But if one gets cold feet, the other is left vulnerable. Two colleagues agree to share credit on a big project, but if one senses hesitation, they may retreat, choosing security over shared success. The stag hunt reminds us, sometimes the best outcomes require everyone to move together with equal courage. The reward is real, but so is the risk of standing alone. Now shift the frame. Enter the chicken game. This time, two drivers race toward each other on a narrow road. Neither wants to swerve, because in this game, swerving means weakness. It means being called a coward, a chicken. If one swerves and the other doesn't, the one who holds firm wins the moment. But if both swerve, they avoid disaster at the cost of their pride. And if neither swerves, the crash is catastrophic. This isn't about shared gain, it's about bluffing, brinkmanship, waiting for the other to flinch. You see it in trade wars, in political showdowns, even in teenage standoffs. Each side digs in, hoping the other breaks first, and the longer they wait, the higher the risk. The chicken game teaches that pride can be just as dangerous as betrayal. Because in some games, refusing to yield is the most reckless move of all. Both models offer powerful lessons. The stag hunt teaches that trust can unlock incredible rewards, but only when everyone commits. Even a hint of doubt can cause people to retreat into smaller, safer choices. The chicken game, on the other hand, shows how tension, pressure, and pride can trap people in escalating standoffs, where holding your ground becomes a show of strength, even when it leads to ruin. Game theory doesn't simplify life. It reveals its structure. It shows us the shape of these choices, the invisible scaffolding behind political negotiations, business decisions, family dynamics, and global crises. Because the more clearly we see the game, the more wisely we can choose how to play. In the world of game theory, we often speak of logic, of cold calculations, of players who weigh outcomes with surgical precision, seeking only to maximize their own reward. But real life is rarely that clean. Because people, real people, don't just care about outcomes. They care about whether those outcomes feel fair. Even in the most strategic decisions, where numbers seem to rule and self-interest dominates, fairness still holds surprising power. Traditional models assume that players want the most they can get. But time and again, human behavior defies that script. Because we are not only calculators, we are storytellers, moral judges, social beings wired to feel, to remember, and to push back when the scales seem unjust. One of the clearest examples comes from the ultimatum game. It's simple. 2 players, 1 sum of money. The first player proposes a split. The second can accept, and both walk away richer. Or reject, and both walk away with nothing. Logic says, accept anything above 0. $1 is better than none. But logic doesn't always win. Because when offers seem too low, say 10% of the total, many people say no, even if it costs them, even if it means leaving money behind. Why? Because it feels unfair. And sometimes, walking away is worth more than being taken advantage of. That refusal isn't just emotional, it's strategic. It sends a message. If you treat me unfairly, I won't play along. This logic plays out far beyond experimental games. In business, deals collapse not because they're unprofitable, but because one side feels like they're giving too much or getting too little. In teams, unequal credit or blame can tear partnerships apart, even when goals are being met. In politics, policies that feel unbalanced can spark resistance, protests, even revolt. Fairness shapes not just what people desire, but what they'll tolerate. And game theory has evolved to reflect this complexity. Enter behavioral game theory, a field that blends classical strategy with psychology, emotion, culture, and social norms. Because people don't just ask, "What will I get?" They ask, "What does this say about me? About us? About the rules we're playing by?" Fairness doesn't always mean splitting things evenly. Sometimes it means recognizing effort, risk, or context. A 70-30 split might feel fair if one person did more work, but a 50-50 offer can feel insulting if it ignores that imbalance. And across cultures, in markets, in households, on playgrounds and battlefields, one truth holds. When people feel mistreated, they're often willing to lose something just to make a point. That's not poor strategy. It's a different kind of logic, one rooted in dignity, trust, and the long memory of how we treat one another. Game theory helps us understand not just what works, but what matters. And sometimes, fairness is the only strategy that keeps the game from breaking altogether. Sometimes people walk away from free money. Sometimes they cling to bad deals, reject golden opportunities, or turn down choices that seem objectively perfect on paper. And when they do, it raises a question. Why would anyone ignore the rational move? In traditional game theory, the answer would be simple. They shouldn't. Rational players, the theory says, act to maximize benefit, money, safety, power, any measurable gain. But real life doesn't always follow the math. Take the ultimatum game, for example. We've seen how people reject unfair offers, even if it means losing money. That isn't irrational. It's a message. It's a stance. It's someone saying, "I'd rather walk away than be treated without dignity." Because people don't just chase outcomes, they protect principles. They think about how choices make them feel, what those choices signal, and what kind of world those choices help shape. And that matters, sometimes more than the reward itself. Humans don't live in short rounds. They live in relationships, memories, consequences that echo. A lopsided deal might offer a short-term gain, but accepting it can feel like surrendering self-respect. From that perspective, saying no isn't a mistake. It's a declaration. I won't reward unfairness, even if it costs me. Emotion also plays its part. The most logical strategy may offer the highest average reward. But people don't live in averages. They live in regrets, in fears, in gut feelings shaped by past wounds. Even a tiny risk of humiliation can outweigh a massive potential gain, especially if someone's been hurt before, by betrayal, by loss, by being the only one who trusted and got burned. And then there's the reality of limited information. Most decisions in life don't come with full visibility. We estimate, we guess, we fill in the blanks with stories and instincts. In that fog, even the rational move can feel dangerous, because what looks smart in theory might feel reckless when the other player's intentions are a mystery. That's why game theory evolved. Out of cold logic emerged behavioral game theory, a fusion of strategy and psychology. It recognizes that people don't just react to numbers. They respond to framing, to emotion, to the tone of a decision, to the shadows behind it. What seems irrational from the outside often makes perfect sense once you step inside the human experience. Because there's always more beneath a decision. Memory, context, pain, pride, hope. Game theory offers the map, but human behavior brings the missing dimension. meaning. And in that fuller picture, logic is still powerful. But it's not the only compass. Sometimes, the wisest path isn't the one that leads to the biggest prize. It's the one that lets you sleep at night. What happens when reason meets feeling? When the sharp line of strategy collides with the soft weight of emotion? Sometimes, people make choices that defy the spreadsheet, ignore the odds, and walk away from what makes sense. Why? Because what feels right can be stronger than what looks smart. In many decisions, we expect clarity. We assume people will weigh the risks, do the math, and choose the optimal path. But humans don't operate like calculators. They carry memories, insecurities, and invisible wounds. They don't just want outcomes. They want to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. And when those deeper needs aren't met, logic alone isn't enough. Take the classic offer-reject game. One person is given a sum of money and asked to share part of it. The second person can accept, and both walk away richer, or reject, and both lose everything. On paper, it's simple. Any amount is better than nothing. Accept it. Take the win. But that's not what usually happens. When the offer feels unfair, many people walk away. They'd rather lose money than accept disrespect. That's not a miscalculation. It's a message. It says, if you treat me like I don't matter, I won't play your game. Emotions aren't glitches in the decision-making process. They are part of the process. Anger can override compromise. Pride can anchor someone in place. Fear of looking weak can push people to hold ground long after it makes sense to do so. And someone who's been betrayed before? They may hesitate to trust, even when trust would lead to a better future. These reactions aren't random. They have structure. They serve a purpose. In negotiations, conflicts, and diplomacy, emotion becomes part of the equation. It shapes not just what people want, but what they'll tolerate. It influences not only the choices, but the meaning behind them. In high-stakes environments, business boardrooms, global summits, even family decisions, the emotional landscape often carries more weight than the numbers on the page. That's why emotional intelligence is as essential as strategy. Understanding what others value, not just materially, but emotionally, can change the outcome entirely. Sometimes, respect is more persuasive than power, empathy more effective than leverage, fairness more enduring than force. And recognizing your own reactions, your own flashes of frustration, your quiet pride, your old fears, can prevent a moment of emotion from becoming a long-term mistake. Because when emotions and logic collide, things get messy. But they also get real. The smartest move isn't always the one with the highest reward. Sometimes, it's the one that leaves people feeling seen, understood, valued. And that isn't weakness. That's what keeps the game from breaking. That's what keeps the players coming back. Where does strategy live when the stakes aren't high? When no one's negotiating peace, winning a lawsuit, or launching a billion-dollar campaign? It lives in the quiet moments, in the small choices, in the pauses that most people don't even notice. Because game theory, the science of strategy, doesn't only belong to boardrooms, war rooms, or ivory towers. It's woven into the rhythm of everyday life. Take something as simple as an elevator. You see someone rushing toward the doors. Do you hold them open or let them close? It depends on whether you're in a hurry, on whether they look grateful or annoyed, on whether they might hold the door for you next time. That decision is small, but it's strategic, because it weighs more than just convenience. It weighs relationship, expectation, perception. Or consider merging lanes in traffic. You could speed up, slide ahead, take your place, or slow down, let someone else in. And what you choose doesn't depend only on you. It depends on what the other driver might do next. If they speed up, you back off. If they hesitate, you seize the gap. This dance of reading intentions and adjusting your own is a kind of silent negotiation. It's strategy without the title. The same quiet reasoning plays out in relationships. Do you speak up after an argument or wait for them to reach out first? Do you apologize or wait to see if they even noticed? Too much pressure and you risk pushing them away. Too little and you fade from view. These aren't calculations in the mathematical sense, but they are judgments, deeply human ones. Even in something as casual as texting, strategy slips in. How long should you wait to reply? Is it okay to double text? What does silence mean? A message ignored might lead someone to retreat. A quick reply might signal interest or neediness. It depends. It always depends. At work, strategy is everywhere. Do you lead a project or stay in the background? Speak boldly in the meeting or watch the room and pick your moment. These choices reflect more than ambition. They reflect how you expect others to interpret your move and how you want to be seen. Even shopping has layers of strategy. Do you wait for a sale? Act before a product sells out? Choose the familiar brand or gamble on a cheaper option? Retailers design promotions with this psychology in mind. They count on your anticipation, your fear of missing out, your instinct to compare. And on social media, every click, like, and comment carries weight. Should you share that post? Will people agree or attack? Are you building a voice or risking your reputation? You make these decisions in a split second, but they are loaded with prediction. You are imagining the game board of human reaction. In all these moments, we don't just act. We respond. We adjust. We anticipate. We think not just about what we want, but about how our choice fits into a shared space with others. A web of expectations, assumptions, and silent rules. And that's what makes game theory so quietly present in daily life. Not because we're trying to win, but because we're trying to belong, to move carefully through a world where others are moving too. They're everywhere. From corner shops to global corporations, businesses are making moves that echo the very heart of game theory, whether they've studied it or never heard its name. Because at its core, strategy in business is about more than reaching your goal. It's about reaching it while others are trying to do the same. Most businesses don't operate in isolation. They live in markets, ecosystems, competitive arenas where every decision ripples outward. Pricing, product launches, ad campaigns. These aren't solo performances. They're moves on a shared board. And the best players aren't just reacting, they're predicting. Take pricing, for example. If one grocery chain drops the price of a popular item, its rivals are watching. If they don't respond, customers may drift away. But if everyone lowers prices, profit margins crumble. That's not just competition. That's a strategic chain reaction. Each company is calculating, what will they do if we do this? It's not written down as an equation, but the logic is pure game theory. Or consider product launches. Two tech firms, both racing to unveil the next big thing. Move too soon, and you risk glitches, bad reviews, weak sales. Wait too long, and the market may vanish. Success isn't just about internal readiness. It's about timing, relative to everyone else. Sometimes, the smartest decision isn't the boldest move. It's the strategic pause, the watchful delay, the quiet pivot in response to a rival's signal. Even advertising is a battlefield of strategy. One brand chooses a heartwarming message, another answers with humor, a third cuts through with cold, rational facts. Each tone isn't chosen in isolation. It's a counterpoint, a positioning move designed to contrast, stand out, claim a space the others haven't. What looks like creativity is often tactical. Every campaign, a response to what's already in play. These decisions may appear instinctive, but they follow a deeper rhythm. Anticipate, respond, influence. That's the core of strategic interaction. No formulas required, just awareness. Just the question, what will they do if we do this? Sometimes, strategy means holding back. Imagine two major retailers facing the holiday season. Both know that offering discounts could win short-term sales, but deep down, they also know. If either one flinches, a price war begins. So they wait, watch, hold their ground. It might look like cooperation, but it's more likely mutual restraint. A silent standoff. Each company betting the other is thinking the same way. In business, every move sends a message, and every silence does too. Companies learn over time how their competitors react, not from textbooks, but from experience, from observation, from trial, error, and adaptation. Whether they call it game theory or simply strategy, the principles are there, quietly guiding the next move. Politics may seem chaotic from the outside, a blur of statements, alliances, and standoffs. But beneath the surface, there is structure, there is rhythm, there is strategy. Because when the stakes are high, when power is at play and uncertainty hangs in the air, decisions are rarely random. They are moves, each one part of a silent game where the goal is not always to win outright, but to survive, to advance, to outmaneuver. Game theory helps us see the shape of these moves, not to simplify them, but to understand their hidden logic. Take international diplomacy. No country acts in isolation. Every action, imposing sanctions, signing treaties, offering aid, carries echoes. Send humanitarian support? You may be cultivating goodwill, soft power for future leverage. Tighten trade restrictions? You risk triggering retaliation. A tit-for-tat sequence where each side inches closer to crisis. These choices aren't just about national interest. They're about anticipating response, acting while imagining how others might counter. It's a chessboard with dozens of players, each holding incomplete information, each trying to move before being moved upon. A vivid example: nuclear deterrence. Two nations, both armed, both aware that if one strikes, the other will strike back. The result? Mutually assured destruction. No one wants to be first. No one dares to be second. And so, a strange kind of peace holds. In game theory, this echoes the chicken game. Two players hurtling toward each other, each hoping the other will swerve, both knowing that if neither yields, everyone loses. This logic also plays out in elections. Candidates don't just push their own agendas. They adapt. They respond. If one party talks economy, another pivots to social justice. If a third party rises, the entire narrative shifts. These are not aimless changes. They are responsive strategies, crafted in real time to position, to contrast, to gain ground without overextending. Inside governments, strategy grows more intimate. Coalitions form, fragile partnerships woven from conflicting priorities. Leaders must trade favors, make concessions, and broker influence, not to dominate, but to keep the machine barely moving forward. Every vote has a cost. Every alliance carries risk. Even public statements become tools. A leader says, "We won't intervene," not to tell the truth, but to buy time, lower tension, or test reactions. Sometimes a threat is made, not to act, but to see who flinches first. It's not always what's said that matters. It's why, when, and to whom. What unites all these political moments is uncertainty. No one has perfect insight. No side sees the full picture. Decisions are made in fog, with instincts, fragments, and guesses. That's where game theory shines. Not because it tells leaders what to do, but because it reveals the invisible web beneath their moves, the structure, the risk, the possibility that even chaos can follow a logic all its own. In the wild, it's easy to imagine that survival comes down to muscle and speed. Who runs faster, who bites harder, who sees first in the dark. But look closer, and you'll find something else at play: strategy. Because in nature, it's not just about strength. It's about making the right move at the right moment, often in response to someone else's move. This is where game theory quietly enters the forest, the ocean, the savanna. Not through conscious planning. Animals don't solve equations. They don't run simulations. But the logic that drives their behavior often mirrors the same principles we see in human games of strategy. Over time, evolution shapes these patterns. Strategies that work persist. Those that fail fade. And what remains is a behavioral equilibrium born not from thought, but from generations of quiet, adaptive trial and error. One of the simplest examples is in food competition. Imagine two animals eyeing the same meal. If they both charge in aggressively, they risk injury. If one backs down, it stays safe, but goes hungry. So, what's the best long-term move? Often, it's a mix. Sometimes fight, sometimes yield. And over time, this mixed behavior settles into a rhythm. Biologists call this the hawk-dove game. In this model, hawks always fight. Doves always retreat. If every animal behaves like a hawk, injuries pile up. If all are doves, resources are stolen by the boldest. But when both strategies exist in balance, nature finds a kind of peace. No one chose it. No one planned it. But evolution rewards what keeps the system going. Game theory gives language to this balance. Another remarkable case: cooperation. Some birds, while the group feeds, take turns standing guard. It looks selfless. One bird watches while others eat. But in a group that takes turns, everyone gains protection over time. And if one bird refuses to watch, the others may stop protecting it. There's a cost to selfishness. Even if they don't understand it, the logic is clear. Over generations, the behavior survives because it works. Among primates, this becomes even more nuanced. Grooming isn't just about cleanliness. It's a social currency. One monkey grooms another, expecting the favor returned. This tit-for-tat dynamic, seen in nature, mirroring game theory's classic model, builds alliances, reduces conflict, and keeps the group stable. It's strategy with fur and fingers. Even on a microscopic level, viruses and bacteria play games. Some attack their hosts viciously, spreading fast, but burning out. Others evolve to spread more slowly, keeping the host alive just long enough to reach more bodies. Those that strike the right balance, not too lethal, not too soft, tend to survive longer. That balance, too, is a strategic adaptation. Whether it's animals in the wild, primates in the trees, or microbes in the bloodstream, life is filled with decisions that depend on what others are doing. That's what game theory helps biologists see: a framework to model survival as interaction. Across ecosystems, species, and time, strategy is not just a human trait. It is part of how life moves, adjusts, and endures. We often imagine machines as silent, obedient tools, processing commands, following instructions, executing tasks with mechanical precision. But today, in a world woven together by algorithms, many machines are no longer acting alone. They are operating in environments filled with other decision-makers, other humans, other machines, all with competing goals, uncertain behaviors, and rapidly changing dynamics. And to move wisely in that space, machines need more than logic. They need strategy. That's where game theory enters the digital realm. Behind your GPS rerouting, your rideshare surge pricing, and the ad you didn't know was bidding for your attention, there's strategy quietly humming, built on predictions, interactions, and calculated responses. In online marketplaces, this becomes especially clear. Platforms like Amazon and eBay host millions of sellers, each adjusting their prices to stay competitive. These adjustments aren't human guesses. They're often made by automated pricing tools, algorithms that monitor the market and respond in real time. One seller drops their price. Others follow. One raises it. The rest recalculate. It's not chaos. It's a game, a continuous negotiation of move and countermove, where stability is the unspoken goal. The algorithm's job isn't just to offer a good deal. It's to anticipate rivals, learn from their behavior, and settle into a pricing rhythm that maximizes profit without inviting a price war. Ride-sharing apps use similar tactics. During busy hours, surge pricing kicks in. The goal? To balance supply and demand. But it's more complex than raising fares. Go too high, and riders cancel. Stay too low, and drivers don't show up. The system adjusts dynamically, learning, reacting, predicting how humans will respond at every turn. It's not just logistics. It's a real-time strategic interaction between people and code. Cybersecurity is another high-stakes battleground. Here, AI systems play a strategic game against digital intruders, some of whom may also be using AI. Defenders watch for unusual patterns. Attackers try to blend in. Each side adapts. It's not just about defending the wall. It's about predicting where and how an attack might come, and preparing before it arrives. It's chess with no board, no rules, and no second chances. And as autonomous vehicles enter the roads, strategy becomes a matter of safety. At a four-way stop, a self-driving car must decide: do I wait? Do I go? Will the other driver yield? These aren't fixed rules. They're unfolding choices based on probabilities and real-time behavior. One wrong guess, and the system falters. So the car learns to anticipate, to adapt, to play its own version of the game. Even in machine learning research, agents are trained in simulated worlds, not to follow rules blindly, but to learn through interaction. Some learn to cooperate, others to compete. They evolve strategies based on the presence and responses of other agents with their own goals. This is especially vital in finance, logistics, and multiplayer simulations, where environments shift and no one has full control. In these spaces, strategy is no longer optional. It's essential. Game theory gives machines a way to think in complex systems, to understand that every move affects the next, that outcomes are shared, that reacting well means thinking ahead. As AI continues to weave deeper into daily life, into cities, healthcare, defense, education, its ability to navigate shared realities will define how well it works, how safely it integrates, and how human it can really become. Because the future won't be built on code alone. It will be shaped by how machines learn to play the game. At first glance, game theory feels like a perfect tool. Crisp, logical, elegant. It offers models that map our choices, predict behavior, and guide strategy with mathematical clarity. So why, in the real world, does it so often fall short? Why do carefully planned moves go sideways? Why do predictions collapse? The problem isn't in the math, it's in the world, in its messiness, its contradictions, its refusal to follow the rules we try to place around it. Game theory rests on a few key ideas: that players are rational, that they understand the game they're in, that they have clear goals and access to all the information they need to make the smartest choice. And when these conditions hold, the models can work beautifully. But real life doesn't often cooperate. One of the biggest limitations? Incomplete information. In many decisions, people simply don't know what others are thinking, planning, or even capable of. A strategy that works in theory often assumes too much, that you know your opponent's hand, or at least their motives. But when you're guessing, or worse, working off misinformation, even the best strategy can become a blind leap. Negotiations are a clear example. People rarely show all their cards. They bluff. They shift positions. They withhold. And one hidden variable can unravel an entire plan. Then there's irrational behavior, a force that game theory often overlooks. In its models, players are calm, calculated, always acting in their own best interest. But in the real world, people don't just optimize, they feel anger, fear, pride, spite. Someone may reject a deal, not because it's unfair, but because it feels insulting. Another might take a reckless risk, not because it's logical, but because they want to prove a point. These emotional moves don't fit neatly into equations, but they shape outcomes just the same. Another crack in the model? Shifting incentives. In life, the rules often change mid-game. New players enter. The stakes evolve. A strategy that was brilliant yesterday may collapse tomorrow. Two companies may hold back from a price war for years, until a third competitor arrives and changes the entire landscape. Suddenly, everyone's strategy must be rewritten. Even culture plays a role. What's considered bold in one country might be seen as disrespectful in another. What feels cooperative here might feel manipulative somewhere else. Game theory assumes a kind of universal logic, but decisions don't live in the abstract. They live in human environments, with their own rules, their own stories, their own expectations. That's why modern researchers are evolving the field, creating more flexible models that include uncertainty, learning, and imperfect behavior. These newer approaches try to account for the blurred edges of real human interaction. Still, no model can capture everything we are. People are unpredictable, emotional, sometimes contradictory. We don't always play to win. We play to be understood, to be respected, to leave a mark. Game theory remains a powerful lens, one that reveals patterns, illuminates tension, and helps guide us through complexity. But the world doesn't always follow the rules, because people don't either. And that's not a flaw. That's what makes decision-making so deeply human, so endlessly fascinating. Game theory gives us tools, clean models, simple frameworks, a way to break down decisions into players, moves, payoffs, and outcomes. And with the right structure, these models can reveal patterns, showing how people often respond to incentives, to risk, to competition. But when we turn that lens toward the full depth of human life, we hit the edge of what strategy can explain. Because people aren't just players in structured games. They are living systems, full of memory, mood, meaning. And behavior, as it turns out, is harder to predict than it is to model. One of the first limits is assumed consistency. Game-based models often expect that if a person acts one way in a scenario, they'll act the same way again if the setup is identical. But life doesn't work like that. Someone might cooperate today and compete tomorrow, not because the rules changed, but because their mood did, or because of something that happened that morning, or a quiet shift in what they need. Context changes everything. Cultural background, personal history. Even whether someone slept well the night before can tip a decision in an entirely new direction. Another challenge is incomplete information. Game models often assume everyone knows the stakes, understands the rules, and sees the options clearly. But real life? It's built on guesses. We misread intentions. We misunderstand signals. We act on partial knowledge and fill in the gaps with stories. And so, a decision that seems irrational may simply be made in the dark. Then come shifting goals. What matters to a person at one point in time might not matter later. Money today, reputation tomorrow, peace of mind next week. A person negotiating a raise might care about prestige in the moment, then switch to valuing flexibility after a sleepless night or a call from home. These evolving priorities make long-term predictions fragile. Even in structured environments, voting booths, boardrooms, courtrooms, people surprise us. They delay decisions out of politeness. They give up advantages to build trust. They act on principle when logic would say to play the game. And then there are the emotions: fear, pride, guilt, joy, frustration. These aren't just background noise. They shape decisions in ways no formula can fully capture. Someone might stay quiet in a meeting, not because it's strategic, but because they're nervous. Someone might reject a good offer, not because it's unwise, but because it feels unfair. Even subtle shifts, like tone, body language, or memory, can steer behavior in unexpected ways. Over time, researchers have tried to account for this. They've evolved models to include uncertainty, bias, habit, and insights from psychology and neuroscience. These newer versions paint a more human picture. But still, no model can predict with perfect accuracy how a person will behave in every situation. Because we are not fixed. We are not formulas. We are stories in motion. Strategic games offer us guidance. They highlight tensions. They help us prepare. They reveal possibilities. But they don't contain the full truth of who we are. And maybe that's the point. It's the unpredictability, the sudden kindness, the quiet defiance, the choice that doesn't make sense but feels deeply right. That makes understanding human behavior not just a science, but an art. Not every game ends. Not every game has a winner. And not every game plays by the same rules for very long. Some games evolve as you play them. The pieces shift, the board expands, the goalposts move, and the rules rewrite themselves mid-match. These aren't just exceptions. They are everywhere. They're the games of real life, and they're far more common than the fixed games we learn about in theory. Traditional strategy teaches us about closed systems, clear beginnings, known players, fixed rules, a definite outcome. Like chess, 2 players, 1 board, win or lose. But life is open-ended. It isn't just one match. It's an unfolding sequence of moves where the players change, the stakes change, and sometimes even the objective changes entirely. Why do some games never end? One reason is simple. The players keep changing. In politics, a negotiation may stretch on for decades, not because no one wants peace, but because the negotiators change. New leaders come in. Old ones step out. Each one brings a new agenda, a new worldview, a different sense of urgency. And suddenly, it's not the same game anymore. In business, the same story unfolds. 2 companies may start off competing for market share, then pivot to compete on innovation, and later find themselves playing defense against regulatory threats or disruptive technology. The goal keeps changing, and so do the rules. What worked yesterday might be useless tomorrow. Success is no longer about mastery of the current system, but about adaptation to the next one. And sometimes, games go on because continuation is profitable. Incentives matter. If dragging something out serves someone's interest, they'll keep playing. A business might bury a rival in legal red tape, not to win outright, but to slow them down. A political party might stall negotiations, not to reach a solution, but to energize its base. In these cases, delay becomes a strategy, and in many systems, there's no defined victory at all. What does it mean to win in climate diplomacy, or cultural movements, or the evolution of a friendship? There's no finish line, no checkmate, only the next decision, the next response, the next ripple in a complex system that never fully settles. Even in our personal lives, the rules shift. What we tolerated at 20 no longer works at 50. Workplace dynamics evolve. Friendships shift tone. A joke that bonded you once might cause silence today. These social games don't come with instruction manuals. They're played by feel, by pattern, by the rhythm of how people change each other just by being in the same room. These ever-evolving games challenge the idea that there is a perfect strategy. There isn't. Not in systems that don't sit still. Success here isn't about winning. It's about staying in. It's about showing up when the rules no longer make sense. Learning again. Adapting again. Playing the long game even when the game keeps shifting beneath your feet. Because in these endless games, the smartest move is not always the sharpest one. It's the one that lets you keep playing while everyone else burns out trying to win. Sometimes, the smartest move isn't to play harder. It's to change the game entirely. Not by cheating, not by quitting, but by stepping back far enough to see that the rules themselves might be the problem. In strategy, we often assume the game is fixed. The players are known. The goal is clear. The structure is stable. But reality doesn't work that way. The world is full of unspoken agreements, assumptions passed off as truths, systems that only seem permanent because no one questions them. And that's where strategy evolves. Changing the rules doesn't always mean breaking them. It means reshaping the frame so that new paths become possible. In some situations, the game traps everyone involved, locked in cycles of competition, loss, stagnation. And no matter how clever your move, you can't escape without changing the board itself. Take business. Two companies locked in a price war, each slashing margins to survive. It's a race to the bottom. No one wins. But what if one company stopped playing that game? What if instead of cheaper, they offered better? Premium service. Community. Added value that changed the customer's focus. Suddenly, the measure of success isn't price. It's trust, experience, loyalty. And just like that, a new game begins. In politics, the same idea unfolds. A party keeps losing under a winner-takes-all system. No amount of campaigning can fix the math. So they push for electoral reform, ranked choice, proportional voting, coalition models. It's not a shortcut to victory, but it opens the door to fairer competition. More voices, more representation, and more possibilities than the old game allowed. In everyday life, the same principle holds. Imagine a workplace where visibility matters more than contribution, where the loudest voice wins and credit follows charisma. One team member, quiet but perceptive, starts documenting their efforts, sharing notes, proposing a feedback loop that rewards substance over style. They haven't broken the system. They've upgraded it. The social game has changed because someone questioned why it rewarded what it did. Even in negotiation, when two sides are stuck, a deadlock on a single issue, the only path forward might be to widen the frame. Introduce a shared goal. Offer an unrelated concession. Bring in a neutral third voice to shift the energy. Now the standoff becomes a sequence. The binary becomes a dialogue. And the game begins to move again. Changing the rules isn't easy. It requires awareness, timing, and the humility to recognize when a system no longer serves. The people who do it well aren't ignoring the game. They've studied it deeply enough to know where it breaks down. They don't reject strategy. They expand it. Because not all victories come from playing better. Some come from redefining what it means to win. Changing the rules isn't rebellion. It's design. It's the art of shaping space where movement was stuck, of carving new outcomes from rigid patterns, of turning a no-win situation into an invitation to innovate. And the best part? You don't always have to wait for permission. Sometimes, the smartest strategy is simply the one that makes room for something better to emerge. Imagine this: a four-way stop. No honking, no guessing. No one lunging forward, no one stalling in fear. Just a quiet, seamless flow. Each driver anticipating, each move timed in silent harmony. Not because they read each other's minds, but because they understood the game. This is what life might feel like if everyone knew the hidden language of strategy. Not perfect prediction, but better coordination. Not total control, but wiser timing. Because at its core, strategy, especially as game theory shows it, isn't just about you. It's about you in relation to others. Your move shaped by theirs. Their choice shaped by yours. When people grasp this dynamic, their decisions change, not just to win, but to create flow, stability, mutual gain. In conflict, they pause, not from weakness, but from vision. Instead of reacting in heat, they weigh the incentives. They map the ripple effects. They choose the path that brings the storm down, not up. Arguments shift from "I must be right" to "what gets us both forward." Because sometimes the smartest strategy isn't conquest, it's transformation. Cooperation becomes sturdier too. When everyone understands that trust is fragile but powerful, they don't gamble with it so carelessly. They show up. They commit. Not just for kindness, but because they see the long arc of shared success. Even rivals play smarter. Instead of driving each other into the ground with price wars, burnout, or sabotage, they recognize when to pull back, when the pie can grow instead of being split, when today's restraint leads to tomorrow's prosperity. They learn that some games are zero-sum, but many are not. And wisdom is knowing which is which. Teaching, parenting, leading, these all evolve too. When strategy is understood, punishment gives way to guidance. Coercion gives way to incentive. Structure is no longer rigid, it's responsive. Built with real human behavior in mind, not just ideal models. On a larger scale, governments, organizations, treaties, a shared fluency in strategy reduces stalemate. It builds trust over time through repeated, visible interaction. When all sides know that mutual concessions are not losses, but investments in stability, peace becomes more than just a hope. It becomes a design. This doesn't mean turning people into cold calculators. The opposite, actually. It means seeing with a clearer lens, understanding not just your options, but how your choices echo, how every action is a message, how every silence is too. It's the shift from reacting to responding, from stumbling to dancing. Life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes more navigable, less wasteful, less surprising in the worst ways, more human, because we understand each other as decision makers, not just emotion-fueled mysteries. And when enough people think this way, systems improve. Fewer deadlocks, fewer traps, more space for creative solutions, and for outcomes where everyone can do just a little better. If more people knew the game, life would still be unpredictable, but it might finally start making more sense. Sometimes, life makes more sense when you stop taking it so personally. Not every word is a judgment. Not every silence is rejection. Not every setback is cosmic punishment. Sometimes, it's just a move in a larger system. That's why seeing life as a game can be strangely comforting. Not a joke, not a competition, but a framework. With players, with rules, with patterns, with choices and outcomes. You're not the only one navigating. Everyone else is making moves too. Sometimes for the same goals, sometimes for different ones, but always strategically. This doesn't mean life becomes robotic. It means it becomes legible. In a workplace, you might wonder, why is that person difficult? Why the sudden shift in tone? Why the cold shoulder? But step back, zoom out, and you might see they're playing to win within the structure. Deadlines, targets, performance reviews, politics. They're not just emotional. They're responding to incentives. They're not villains. They're players, just like you. In relationships, conflict often feels personal, but it's often a breakdown in unspoken rules. One person assumes honesty is priority. The other assumes protection is. One thinks, say what you feel. The other thinks, don't rock the boat. They're not at war. They're just not playing by the same playbook. When you see a relationship as a cooperative game, suddenly it's clear. Both sides want the game to go on. That means clear rules, trust, communication. Not keeping score, but keeping the game alive. Even in high-stress moments, a job interview, a negotiation, a family argument, this mindset helps. You're not the only one under pressure. They're weighing options too. They have fears, agendas, constraints. And when you know that, you stop reacting. You start responding, not to control, but to co-create a better next move. One of the most powerful gifts of this lens is detachment. Not coldness, not indifference, but clarity. If a game doesn't go your way, you don't crumble. You adjust, you rethink, you pivot, you learn. You stop shouting at the sky and start reworking the map. You focus on what's within reach. That's what good players do. They don't just memorize plays. They adapt to the field, to the wind, to the opponents, to the allies. Life, in all its unpredictability, becomes less frightening when you expect the rules to shift. When you know change is part of the structure. That next twist, it doesn't knock you over. It challenges you to grow. Seeing life as a game won't make it simple, won't make it painless, but it gives you something precious. A map for messy terrain, a compass when the goalposts move. It helps you see patterns where once there was only chaos. And when you understand that, you play better. Not just for yourself, but for everyone at the table. Not to win, but to keep playing well. Because the best players don't just survive the game, they make it meaningful. Where do we go after all the strategies, all the models, all the maps of decision and reaction? What's next for the theory of games when life itself feels more like one with every passing year? Game theory began with a simple aim: to understand how people choose, not in isolation, but in relationship. What do you do when what happens to you depends on what someone else does? That question still echoes through the halls of economics, diplomacy, psychology, and now, through circuits, algorithms, and neural networks. Because today, game theory isn't just for professors and poker players. It's shaping the minds of machines, the policies of governments, the rhythm of your ride-share app, and the pricing of your groceries. It's gone from chalkboards to code. But the biggest shift, it's not technological, it's philosophical. The models of the past were clean. Few players, clear moves, fixed rules. But the world is messy. People change their minds. New actors emerge. The rules shift mid-game. So now, the future of game theory isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. Can our models evolve as fast as reality? In artificial intelligence, we already see the need. Self-driving cars don't operate on paper. They navigate the chaos of the real world, with pedestrians, bikers, uncertainty. They don't just need logic, they need strategy. They must predict, adjust, react to reactions. It's no longer programming, it's playing. And it doesn't stop there. Multi-agent systems are everywhere. In swarms of drones, blockchain ecosystems, automated stock trading, even crowds of online users interacting in invisible games of influence, engagement, and reaction. These are games with thousands of players. No central referee, no obvious endpoint. How do you model that? You don't just model moves, you model emergence. That's where game theory is headed, into the heart of complexity. Not just what people do, but why, when, and how their inner worlds collide. Psychologists now work with theorists to bring emotion into the models. Not everyone plays to win. Some play not to lose. Some play to be seen. Some play not at all. In this space, you don't just optimize, you empathize. Governments, too, are listening. Game theory is helping craft policies that don't just incentivize, but inspire. From climate cooperation to cyber defense, from energy sharing to global health. In a world where long-term survival depends on short-term restraint, game theory is being rewritten to reward sustainability over dominance. It's becoming a toolkit not just to understand the world, but to redesign it. To build systems where better decisions rise naturally, not through force, but through structure. And at its heart, it still returns to that same ancient question. What do you do when your future depends on someone else's choice? Because in the end, that's what life is. A million micro games of trust, timing, cooperation, and courage. And the more we understand them, the better we can play. Not just to win, but to keep the game alive for everyone.